This video is to introduce the two main activities that we'll be doing in the anatomy course, in the simplified écorché course. So one of them is going to be building simplified versions of the ribcage, the pelvis, and the skull. And for that, we'll be using a process which is a sort of outside in, or a carving process. We'll approximate the outside form and we'll shape ourselves in. The other part of this course, of course, is building up our soft tissues onto this skeleton armature. So in that case, we'll be using more of an inside-out process where we'll be keeping our forms smaller than the exterior surface that we are expecting, and being quite conservative about how we build up to that surface. So in that case, and I'll be going through both of those processes and how they apply. In my view, most sculptors are using some combination of these two ways of working in sculpture. And in this case, I want to introduce both methods because I think they have their own benefits and they are sort of suited to the different things that we're doing in this course. Okay, so the first one, I'm just starting with lesson one, activity one, that focuses on the simplified forms of the skeleton. Of the ribcage, the pelvis, and the skull. So the first one is the ribcage, and just looking at this, you can see this is one of the models from the notes. Now, just looking at this, you can see how complex this would be to try to sculpt from any one point and build out from there. So what we want to do is have a logic, have a process to follow along through this that we can achieve symmetry to the form, and that allows us to go from big, simple forms to more specific details. Even though in this case we're still trying to keep things relatively simple and just get the important information that is going to help us with our actual drawing skills. So what we're going to be doing is taking a taking a piece of plasticine. You could use potter's clay if you prefer to work with that. But taking this one is called Plastiplay. It's available in Australia. It's just a non-drying out type of plasticine. Some of them dry out badly. This is a really nice one, doesn't dry out. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to start off by approximating the form that we're doing. Now in this course, what we're going to be doing is building this at the same scale as our model. So if you have one of the kits, you can just use this as your frame of reference for what we're doing here. Now, if you have calipers, you can use that to actually measure the proportions and give yourself a good approximation. If you're doing this in person with me in the class, what I'll have there is a series of 3D printed models that approximate the stages that we're going to be going through. So what we're starting with is a kind of a flattened egg. So it's a sort of an egg shape from the front, but when you look at it from the side, you'll see it's compressed. When you look at it from the top, you'll see that it's a little flattened on the bottom surface. So that gives us a nice simplification of the overall form, something that would encapsulate as though we bound around the whole sort of form. So what I'm suggesting you start with in this case, from this sort of outside in, is we just need to get ourselves some kind of general form. We want to try to create some symmetry to this thing, and we want to make it about the same proportion. Now, if you've got, as I say, if you've got calipers, you can use that to measure, or you could even just use your hand just to give yourself just sort of lock your fingers, just give yourself a guide to how big this needs to be. So what I suggest, and this is going to apply to the other method of sculpting as well, is that you turn your model to the position where you're looking at, say, a front profile to begin with, and we're going to try to make this as sort of symmetrical as we can. Just get that about right, okay? And then we're going to start doing measurements and checking that our proportions, our length is about right. Okay, so how's that looking? Okay, could be a bit longer. So I'm just building that down, and I'm really focused on, I am thinking about this overall, but I'm also just trying to get that profile, that front view about right. And I'm trying to think about the character of that form, the way, the position that the sort of widest point is, which in the case being an egg form, it's the widest point is below halfway. So we want to make sure that we're getting something where it tapers in. And you can take as much time as you need to approximate this. So these are big, simple proportions that we're aiming for here. Now what we're going to do is rotate to a side profile. So if you're looking at your model, you can do that. But in this case, we have simplified versions of this to work from. So if you're in my class, you'll be able to use one of these models to work from. If you're working online from my notes, you'll be able to work through a series of simplified models on the page. Now, just something that I should mention to you, recently the host for the 3D models that are on here has changed their system. Now, if you're working on an iPad like this one, you need to make sure you don't wipe down initially. You need to wipe up and then down if you want to rotate. If you wipe straight down, it'll actually minimize the model. I don't particularly like that system, but that's what they have now. So just keep that in mind. Wipe up and then you can turn it down to whatever position you need to go to. So what we can do is the same idea. You're looking at this from the front, and you can use the model as your frame of reference for the size, or in the class you can use our model here. And look at it from the front, then we'll rotate around to the side and give ourselves the side view, and we can build that up, little pieces of clay going from larger pieces of clay to smaller pieces of clay, and approximate our big proportions, okay? And again, take as much time as you need to do this, but we are aiming for, we want to be able to compare directly between the model that I'm making and the model on my screen, or if you're in person, the models that I have physically there for you. Once you get this, you've added more clay, and you've got this pretty close to what you think needs to be. What I'd recommend is starting to do a drawing process on your clay. So if you've got the course, or got the kit, or you're attending the course, you'll receive a pack of these sculpture tools. And so there's different functions for them, but one of them is as a drawing tool. So what I'd suggest you do is make a line of symmetry. Once you think you're pretty close to the proportion you need to be in sort of both directions, make yourself a line of symmetry. And on this 3D print I've actually made those lines to help you to understand how that should look. Rotate and take that around, and that's going to help you to check your symmetry and approximate some other forms that we're going to be developing with this. So the big thing is that this concept of hold whatever your reference is when you're modeling, you want to look at a profile, rotate, get that as close as you can, and build it out to where it needs to be. Rotate it around to a side view. You can look at it from a top view. So you just want a direct comparison, similar to if you're observationally drawing something. Your drawing is to one side, and your subject is beside it. You can look directly between them. Just flick your eyes between one and the other, and notice how I got the big proportions right, and what do I need to change. Once you have that form that you're quite happy with that, I'd certainly do more work on this to get this closer to what it needs to be. Then we can rotate, and in this case, you can see in this model that we can see this angle across the top. So what that's about, and it's discussed in the notes, is that we are cutting. You can use this same tool that we've been drawing with to make a cut across here, as sort of carving into this, And that's going to approximate the first rib, which is angling down from up here in the vertebral column towards the sternum. So there's an angle to those ribs. And then we're going to, now that we've got this, we can go on to the next form. So we'll load the next model up. Okay, and in the next model, we will start to draw on the position of the plane break on the front here, running down through here, the thoracic arch that's coming around, and the center line, which we should already have a center line, but we'll mark in where the vertebral column is going, and we'll also mark in these, plane breaks on the back surface as well, because the ribs turn inwards towards the vertebral column here. So to do that, we will need to actually use our tool to actually slice inwards towards that center line. So again, it's sort of like a carving process, working from the big forms to the small forms. So carving inwards like so. Okay, and then we'll move on to the next form. By the time we get to our final model, which is this one here that's been sort of, somewhat detailed, we're looking at how on the front surface here, the ribs fan out as we move downwards, because the sternum is shorter than where the ribs angle down to here. So it's like the ribs have to converge up as they attach on via the cartilage onto the sternum. On the side, they're more parallel, traveling down like this, and on the back, they fan out, but nowhere near the same amount as they do on the front with the sternum, because the thoracic spine or the vertebral column where the ribs attach on is longer. So that's what we're exploring through this process. What I wanted to share with you these models like this, they apply for the pelvis and for the skull. So that it helps you to get your mind around this. It'll really help you to be able to sketch this from imagination down the track. This is a great way of exploring this. But the other point is this process of sculpting, where we work from this big simple form that approximates the outside dimensions, and then we start to carve into it and locate the forms on there. So that's the first activity. Now, when we move on from here to doing the soft tissues onto our skeleton armature, we're following a process which is really from the inside out. So what we're going to be trying to do is just building out enough clay that is below the level that we actually need. So in this case, our deepest level of the body is going to be filled up with this cream color. And so I'm just going to add some nice big lumps of clay, start to fill this out, because I just need to get that area filled so that I've got, physical support so I'm just pressing that into the skeleton here, just pressing the clay in and filling this out. And I'm trying to keep it beneath the level that it's going to be in my actual final thing. So that's what we're going to be doing, and then we're going to be building out, and I'll show you how that works. I'll just come back from here. We'll go back to back to the table of contents for lesson 1. And so onto the first section for the soft tissues. And okay, we'll discuss the inguinal ligament, but here's our first model that's relevant to what we're doing here. So let's zoom in on that. Now, what we want to do is, once again, just the same as I was doing with the outside in method, I'm going to rotate myself around so that I'm looking at, I might rotate, as long as you have an orientation that matches, that's what we want. So in this case, I'm going to orient my pelvis towards me. And so then I'm going to start adding this clay on. I'm thinking about my depth here, not going outside of what is going to be necessary, because it's harder for me to judge the depth than it is the side profiles. So the side profile is more just like a drawing activity where I'm checking that what I'm seeing here, the shape that I'm seeing here, is matching the shape that I'm seeing on my model. So as I add this on here, okay, I'm going to start filling this out, because I know that we are going to have to fill out that, just pressing that into the clay so it won't fall out. And I'm just using smaller and smaller pieces of clay as I go. Once I have this filled out enough, okay, that's looking reasonable. Now what I'm going to do is rotate 90 degrees, so I'm seeing a side profile on both my model and on my 3D model on the screen. And what I'm trying to do then is to make sure that I'm seeing the same amount, for example, of the spines of the vertebral column here, and really seeing across the front of the figure. Now, of course, I can fill out these regions inside as well. I want them to be filled out. But what I'm focusing on primarily at the moment is that side profile, that front profile. I'll rotate this way so you can see. So what I want to try to do is to begin to build this out. Now to do that, I'm actually going to build a kind of fin. I don't need to fill all across that form. I just need to try to build out to the approximation of the surface that I need, because I can fill in between. This is a process that is quite popularized by a great sculptor named Rob Bowden, who now he created the sculpture school at the Florence Art Academy, now teaches out of Athens. And he follows a process which is a very traditional process, and he's really formalized it well, is to build out, and hopefully I'm not putting words in his mouth, but this is approximately the type of logic that he's using in his the type of process that he's teaching. So this is really from the inside outwards rather than that carving inwards process. So we're building out to that outside profile. So I'm going to actually rotate a little bit and move to where the rib cage is, and I just have to make my best guess at where that line should be going. I also need to think about where my center line is going. Being basically a contrapposto, there's a little twist, but he's basically just bending. So his center line should be curving around like this. So I'm starting off, that's really where my center line should be going up through there. So you can see how much I need to fill this volume in, but by being sort of disciplined, not just rushing straight into filling the whole space out, that's giving me the chance to now start to gently or carefully build this intermediate sections in. So I can sort of make sure that I don't, as long as I've got this about right, I'm going to go back to my side profile on the pelvis. I might need to make this a little bit deeper. So just make your best approximation that you can. Take care, if I can look across and cross-reference, how high is that section of the, where am I? It's got to be about like that. Think about where that plane break is, where this drops down and the lower abdomen moves outwards, so that you're getting a good profile there. I can fill out this little section in here because I can see, looking from here, that there needs to be more volume. This is sort of this underlying layer of the body. Of course, you know, we're really interested in the surface anatomy, so we're interested in the muscles and tissues of the surface that the artist can see, rather than what a doctor might be interested in. So we've built out this central fin, and we've built out the sides, And now we're going to start filling in between. And that's the sort of the general process. Being kind of careful, conservative with how we're building up these forms. So that the benefit of doing this is that once we have this form and we're maybe just a little bit below the actual surface that we want to get to, if we feel that looking at our reference that the surface bulges slightly more here and slightly less there, it's very easy to add that little bit more clay. Carving back in is certainly a fine process, but it is sort of easier if you're careful about which way you're going, as long as you stick to one sort of method as you're going, that okay, I'm going to gently go towards the surface. I'm using this as my frame of reference. I can't build out beyond this, too far beyond this. If I rotate this model downwards and I look at this from, let's say from a view like this, I could rotate my model here and say, how does the contour, the edge contour appear for here? How does my model compare if I try to look at a similar view? We go up and then down. So, okay, I know that I need to fill a little bit more into here. And as I'm going, the size of the pieces of clay that I'm using are just going to get progressively smaller. Now, this process that I'm using to build this out is going to be the very same process that we use with every soft tissue that we have on the model. Now, of course, there's going to be times when you overdo your volumes and you will need to carve back in and reshape things, and that's fine, but I wanted to, I generally get people to work from this inside out process that allows us to do this drawing in space, as Rob puts it, where we are building out to the side profiles to give ourselves some kind of guide. Now, of course, someone who's very experienced with sculpture can do things where they carve back in, and they can be very broad because they're thinking in very three-dimensional terms. What this process is about helping you to see in three-dimensional terms and to give you some kind of framework that you can fall back on rather than being sort of lost. It's very easy in sculpture to get lost with the volumes and run start pushing things around. You lose structure. Now, we've got a good structure in this model, but I promise you, I've taught this to a lot of people, it's very easy for volumes to become too large and for you to result in the Incredible Hulk. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep things more human and sort of get to a good sort of idealization of the figure. So it's a way of sort of disciplining your eye and helping you to develop those skills of three-dimensional thinking. So just to recap, we have this mode of working with an outside-in process where we approximate the big, as we've done with the rib cage here, we approximate the general outside proportions. We sort of think of it just in terms of this very, very crude simplification, and then how we can slice into it, draw into it, and subdivide a general form. On the other hand, we have this inside-out process where we can build up our clay gradually, thinking about the profile from the front and from the side or from the top or bottom, and sort of building out to that, and then gradually adding our clay to build out to the surface. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an introduction, a bit of a logic to follow as you're working through this course. And I'll see you in the next video.